All right, everybody, we're back this week for UFC Vegas 89, Namajunas versus Ribas preview, predictions, and breakdown. This takes place this upcoming Saturday from the UFC Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada, with a main event bout in the this is in the flyweight division between two fighters who are technically strawweights in the former strawweight champion in Thug Rose Namajunas taking on Amanda Ribas. Really solid main event. I actually think that fight's a really good main event, and it's going to be a very good fight for as long as it lasts. We'll cover UFC Vegas 88, which took place last night. Honestly, kind of a dumpster fire for a lot of people. A lot of weird decisions. Ovince St. Peru coming through against Kennedy and Chukwu, which I don't think anybody would have expected. I think everybody was pretty much expecting Nzechukwu to just run right through OSP and get a first or second round finish. That did not happen, and OSP actually hurt Kennedy more times than Kennedy could hurt him. The Dolgarian fight was a big fight for me in terms of the betting side of things. If Dolgarian would have got that decision, I would have made a lot of money. It would have been a good night for me. Since he didn't get that decision, everything kind of went to the wayside for me. I was pretty heavy on Dolgarian, came out, dominated in the first round, pretty much got a 10-8. The real question is the second round, because it was pretty much 10-8 Dolgarian round 1, 10-8 Rodriguez round 3, because Dolgarian just gassed out, pushing too hard, but didn't get finished. I don't see how you give the second round to Rodriguez. I know he threatened with a guillotine. I know he landed some strikes, but technically he got almost 4 minutes or a little over 4 minutes of control time in a 5-minute round. And it's not like he didn't have any offense at all in terms of the striking, so I don't understand how you give that second round to Rodriguez. He closed the round better, which can sway the judges, but at the same time, I don't think Rodriguez got that done. I think it was 10-8 round 1, Dolgarian, 10-8 round 3, Rodriguez, and 10-9 round 2, Dolgarian, which should have given it 28-27, 28-27 for Dolgarian via decision. It is what it is. You can't fault the judges. I mean, you can, because a lot of the judges are absolutely idiotic, but at the same time, it is what it is. You got to take judging into consideration, but I think Dolgarian should have got the job done there. But either way, we got to move on, and we're on to UFC Vegas 89, and we're going to kick it off with the first fight in the heavyweight division. All right, guys, first fight up in the heavyweight division, you've got Muhammad Usman taking on Mick Parkin. I'm not going to break this down too long. I think Mick Parkin is the much higher level of fighter in terms of technicality. I think the fighter with higher power, bigger knockout upside, bigger one-hitter, quitter knockout power is Muhammad Usman. I think Usman has gotten better technically in his tenure in the UFC, but at the same time, I think going up against a fighter who can not only push the pace on the feet in terms of the striking, but can change levels, get takedowns, work from the top position, look to use ground and pound, and look to set up submissions. I kind of feel like Muhammad Usman is up against it here, but that's kind of how he is in his entire UFC career. I've picked Usman as a dog in a few different spots. I've picked him as a slight favorite as well. He is a guy who hasn't necessarily disappointed me in terms of the betting window, but in this matchup, I think he's just not technically good enough to deal with a fighter who is as well-rounded as Mick Parkin is as a heavyweight. Parkin's undefeated at 8-0, Muhammad Usman 11-2. Higher level of competition I think you have to give to Muhammad Usman, but Usman beat Jake Collier, who I pretty much think most heavyweights can beat, rolling out of bed, so I don't think that's necessarily a great win, and there was points where he got, clipped up and almost finished by Jake Collier, who does have good hands and decent striking. I think it's not going to be the striking of Parkin, it's going to be his ability to use what this sport is known as, mixed martial arts. It's going to be the striking, transitioning to the grappling, getting the takedowns, looking for top control time, landing ground and pound. I think he's going to be able to outwork a fighter like Muhammad Usman. I think he's going to be able to outland Muhammad Usman, and I think he's going to be able to outgrapple Muhammad Usman. It's just, can Usman land the equalizer and hurt Mick Parkin and knock him out? The only way Usman, I believe, wins this fight, even though we've seen him win decisions before, is by landing a big shot on the chin of Mick Parkin, like he did when he won the Ultimate Fighter against Zach Pauga and knocking him out. He's definitely live for a KO, but I think he's just outgunned and outmatched in terms of an overall mixed martial arts skill set in this matchup, which is why I'm going to be taking Mick Parkin to get the job done via arm triangle choke submission. More than likely, it probably goes to decision, but with how ferocious Usman is, with how wild he is when he throws his strikes, I feel like he can get tired in those later rounds, and I think towards the end of the second round, Parkin's going to get on top, land some vicious ground and pound, and eventually lock up that arm triangle choke submission and get it done. So give me Mick Parkin, second round arm triangle choke submission. Up next, we've got one of the best fights on the card, honestly, in two former Contender Series contract winners in Igor Severino or Igor da Silva taking on Andre Lima in the 125-pound flyweight division. This fight is one that you have to watch. You have to watch this fight. These are two very technical strikers, and there's power and danger on one side, but I also feel like with that power and danger, he puts himself in positions to get knocked out by a technical striker in the likes of Igor da Silva. Going up against Andre Lima, I think Igor is the much more dangerous fighter in this matchup. The forward pressure, the ability to get takedowns. The one thing I do like about Igor da Silva is the fact that if he has close rounds, he'll come out in that next round and try to kill you. Like, he does not care. He's going to go for the finish and try to put you out. Now, against a fighter in Andre Lima who has a decorated kickboxing background, he's a very technical, cerebral striker. He has finishing upside as well. Very good straight punches, long, rangy shots. But again, I don't necessarily see the knockout upside or the finishing upside on the side of Andre Lima unless he can just catch Igor coming in with a big counter and knock him out. On the Contender Series, Severino was kind of... I don't know why it says Igor Severino, but then he goes by Igor da Silva. I wonder if his name is Igor da Silva Severino. I feel like that's probably the case in this situation. But either way, let's get back to what we were talking about. I think Igor da Silva, like I said, is more dangerous. He has the higher finishing upside. And on the Contender Series, man, he was kind of getting pieced up a little bit early by his opponent. Got taken down, I believe, in certain positions, or got taken down at least once. But it was the power in his punches. That left hook couldn't miss all night. And once he hurt his opponent, I mean, he smelled blood in the water and he got that finish. Came out in the second round and just put it on his opponent. Dropped him multiple times in the fight. That left hand couldn't miss. He mixes it up to the body as well. He's pretty much a high guard style of fighter. He'll walk forward, pressure forward, and then try to land big counters and just put you out. But he also goes on the front foot, pushes the opponent back, and really looks to, get you out of there. That's the biggest difference in this fight, is the finishing instinct of Igor da Silva. Andre Lima is probably better in terms of overall technicality, in terms of by-the-book technical striking acumen. He is the better fighter, I believe. He does have the ability to kind of outpoint most fighters, use the jab, use that rear low kick, use the 1-2, measure with the lead hand, circle off, control the distance. He's very good at controlling the range and controlling the distance, which can walk da Silva into big counters as he closes range. But at the same time, I also think that when looking at an overall mixed martial arts skill set, kind of like the first fight we broke down, I think the more well-rounded fighter is da Silva. He can shoot takedowns. He can go for submissions. He can look for ground and pound on the top, but he can also compete on the feet, and like I said, has the higher knockout upside. He's the more powerful striker. He possesses more danger and poses more of a threat than Andre Lima does in terms of this matchup. Lima can win. Lima can kind of pick apart a fighter like Severino or Igor da Silva. He can kind of pick him apart, landing combinations, punctuating with low kicks, landing good body shots, 1-2, liver low kick, 1-2 measure, come back with the cross, and just kind of using his long rangy punches to keep da Silva away from him. But can he keep da Silva away from him for the majority of the fight without getting pressured, without getting pushed back, without getting tired, without getting taken down, without getting hit by a big shot? I don't necessarily think he can, and that's why I'm going to take the underdog in Igor da Silva. I was I was kind of heavy on the Lima side, or Andre Lima side, before I watched the tape. But when I went back and watched both of their Contender Series fight, I mean, I can't really fault Lima for his performance because he did win, but his opponent kind of just skirted around the outside of the octagon, didn't really push the pressure, didn't really push forward and give Lima the chance to land his counters. I do think Severino is going to give Lima that position and give Lima that opportunity to land those counter strikes as the opponent steps in, but I don't think the power is nearly the same considering da Silva's power and finishing upside compared to Lima. So I think the power, the finishing upside, the more well-rounded fighter, the takedowns, the top pressure, the ground and pound, the ability to push forward and go for the finish if they smell blood in the water is on the side of da Silva. So I'm going to take Igor da Silva by a third-round TKO. I think he eventually will break and slow down Lima. I wouldn't be surprised if Lima kind of outpointed da Silva, so it's not my favorite betting spot, but I think this is a spot where if you are betting it, you probably want to take the underdog at like a plus 140, plus 145, because he's more dangerous, because he has more skills, because he's more well-rounded, and because he poses more of a threat. I think all the boxes are kind of checked off. You just have to hope that he doesn't get caught with a big counter when he's pressuring, and just hope that he can close that distance and range off and not get picked apart for 15 minutes. But the pick is going to be Igor Da Silva, third round TKO over Andre Lima. Up next, you have another Contender Series vet who actually competed on the Contender Series 3 times in Steven Nguyen taking on Jarno Aarons. Steven Nguyen got knocked out the first time he went on the Contender Series with a flying knee and finished. And then he went back on the Contender Series, won a split decision, and then came back most recently and knocked out AJ Cunningham. Now, Cunningham is not a great fighter. Cunningham is not a fighter that you can write home about in terms of getting a KO. It was competitive early, but eventually the boxing and the counter ability of Nguyen just kind of won him that fight. Now, Jarno Aarons is actually a pretty decent striker, but he lacks fight IQ. He doesn't really have a game off of his back. He can go for submissions. He almost submitted William Gomez with a triangle, but most of the time if he gets taken down, he'll kind of just sit there and surrender positions. He will throw up submissions, but a lot of the time it's just him surrendering positions and giving up a lot of control time. So I think if there is grappling in this fight, I think the finishing upside probably is on the side of Jarno Aarons, working off of his back and looking for a sub. But at the same time, I don't necessarily think Nguyen is going to go for takedowns. And I think if Aarons looks to shoot and wrestle offensively, I don't necessarily think he has the offensive wrestling to get those takedowns. But if Nguyen gets the takedowns, then he can work off of his back, but he'll also give up control time. The better striker and the better boxer is Steven Nguyen. I mean, this guy's power in his boxing combinations, just 3, 4, 5 punch combos, knocked out an opponent with a crisp 1-2. I mean, just flatlined him face down. On the Contender Series, I think it was a 3 or 4 punch combo. He landed that last one on his chin and just put him out. I mean, this guy has good boxing, good range management, good control. Competing on the Contender Series 3 times can be kind of alarming in terms of if you want to put your money on a fighter like Nguyen. But I think just because of the lack of fight IQ on the side of Aarons, he does have decent boxing. Like I said, he can go for submissions off of his back. Good 1-2s, good straight punches down the middle. He landed a big uppercut in one of his more recent fights where he ended up losing via decision, but landed a big uppercut right up the middle, dropped his opponent, looked for the finish. It was against Sungwoo Choi. Actually landed a vicious counter uppercut off a level change from Choi and dropped him and controlled from the top, but then got reversed and then ended up giving up the rest of the round because of the reversal from Choi. I think Aarons is getting a little bit disrespected, but he hasn't gotten a win in his UFC career. Out of his last 5 fights, he's 2-3. Nguyen is 4-1 in his last 5. I think the competition level with the fights against Sungwoo Choi and Gomez is on the side of Aarons. So if you're going to take a fighter in terms of UFC experience, you would take Jarno Aarons. But at the same time, I just would not feel confident in taking that pick. I think the technicality, the boxing combinations, I mean, Nguyen's hands are crisp and he has the touch of death. We've seen Aarons get hurt multiple times. We've seen him get rocked. We've seen him get wobbled. And I think Nguyen's going to be able to put him out early in the first round. The later the fight goes, I think the cardio advantage does go to Aarons. But I believe Nguyen has some submissions in his back pocket as well. So I'm not going to say that if Nguyen gets caught in a sub with Jarno Aarons on the bottom, I think he can fight it off and, get out of that position and wind up gaining more time in terms of top control and ended up winning on the decision if it gets that far. But at the same time, I don't think we get that. I think we get a knockout in the first round from Steven Nguyen over Jarno Aarons. I think the speed, the power, the technicality in the boxing, the hands are just too crisp for a fighter like Aarons. I think he gets caught coming in with a 3-4 punch combo. That last one punctuates the combination with a vicious knockout. So give me Steven Nguyen or Steve Nguyen to get the job done via first round knockout over Jarno Aarons. Up next, a fight in the bantamweight division between Miles Johns and Cody Gibson. Gibson obviously competed in that phenomenal finale of The Ultimate Fighter against Brad Katona. Ended up losing via, I believe it was a split decision, with Katona coming on late in the third round and kind of just punctuating that win, being able to out-cardio a fighter like Gibson. When I look at it like this, I think Miles Johns is going to be the more powerful fighter. He's fought the higher level of competition in terms of his UFC career, and that always counts for something, with UFC experience. He almost got caught in a rear naked choke by Dan Argueta, but ended up outstriking out wrestling and just controlling the majority of that fight and winning via unanimous decision, kind of exposing the holes in Argueda's stand-up game that we've seen for the majority of his UFC career, even though he hasn't had a ton of fights in that career. Cody Gibson can win this fight late in the third round, in the second round, like late round finish, I think can come from Cody Gibson. Early, he has to watch out for the big overhands, the big uppercuts of Miles Choppa Johns. But that's the thing with Miles Johns. He doesn't really have a ton of volume. He doesn't really put, combinations together. He's kind of a one-strike fighter, and he lacks volume and can lose fights based off of the opponent's output and activity. Gibson is going to be the much more active fighter. Gibson is going to put out more volume. It's just going to be, will he get taken down and controlled by what I believe to be the better wrestler, or who I believe to be the better wrestler in Miles Johns? Or, will Johns be able to land a big counter or a big, shot on his chin and knock him out? I think that the knockout upside is from Johns early, but I think the finishing upside on Gibson is very high late. Midpoint of the second round into the third round, I think the pace, cardio, and pressure of Cody Gibson, if he doesn't get controlled on the ground, if he doesn't get pushed up against the cage, I think he can outwork Miles Johns over 15 minutes. I think he can start to get that pace, pressure, combinations, and get in the face of Miles Johns and slow him down. Because like I said, Johns is a good fighter. Johns has a lot of power. Johns is pretty good technically, but he doesn't put a ton of combinations together, and all of his fights are close. There's never really fights that Johns, dominates. I guess you could say he dominated the Argueda fight, but early he got put in some bad positions, almost getting caught in a rear naked choke. But at the same time, all of his fights are kind of close. And I think the only person that's going to be able to beat him are, number one, fighters who are very good on the feet, very fleet-footed, and have knockout upside like a Mario Batista, or fighters who are going to be able to outstrike, out-volume, and just outwork Miles Johns over 15 minutes. I think you have the perfect fighter in Cody Gibson to outwork Miles Johns in this matchup. I think pushing him back, getting in his face, landing combinations, landing shots to the body, putting combinations together. Now, Gibson's cardio isn't the best late either, but I feel like he can push a higher pace than Miles Johns. I think Gibson finishes Miles Johns late. I think he finishes him in the third round. I think pushing forward, landing combinations. He's got a good 1-2. He's got very solid boxing, really good combinations that he can put together. And if he can avoid those big power shots of Miles Johns, if he can avoid getting controlled on the mat, I think Cody Gibson wins this fight. Now, it's not my favorite betting pick, but I am going to go with the underdog in the Ultimate Fighter finalist in Cody Gibson to outwork Miles Johns, outvolume him, outpoint him, slow him down, and break him down the stretch. Give me Cody Gibson to defeat Miles Johns via third round TKO. Up next, you've got a battle in the featherweight division between Ricardo Ramos taking on Julian Juicy J Erosa. The one thing you have to worry about is durability, and I think you have to worry about durability on both sides. We've seen Ricardo Ramos get knocked out early in the first round by Lerone Murphy. Now, Lerone Murphy is one of the top fighters and one of the top prospects at 145 pounds, so you do have to take that into consideration. But we've also seen Ramos get submitted in a guillotine choke. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. Gets submitted in a guillotine choke by Charles Jourdain, who has showcased submission upside before in his UFC career, but I feel like that was more of a lack of fight IQ on the side of Ramos. Ramos, got put in that guillotine 3 or 4 times before he eventually got submitted, and the adjustments of Jourdain and the lack of awareness from Ramos, who is technically supposed to be the better grappler, is the reason why he got caught in that submission. Erosa is going to have the submission upside in this fight. I think Erosa is going to have the striking advantage, and I think he's going to have the submission advantage, but at the same time, I think the durability of Erosa is a big question mark. Can Ricardo Ramos land one of his vintage spinning elbows on the jaw of Julian Erosa and knock him out? I know Ramos is known as a grappler, but he doesn't have bad striking. He moves around well. He has decent defense, really good kicks. That's probably the best part of his game. Body kicks, head kicks, really good low kicks. He'll kind of try to keep the opponent on the outside and then change levels and get a takedown. But I think the pressure and the grappling of Erosa is going to be the biggest difference in this matchup. I think Julian Erosa is going to be able to kind of slow down Ramos, hurt him on the feet, get him uncomfortable, and force him to panic wrestle. And I think he's going to get caught in that front choke, get caught in a Darce choke, get caught in an Anaconda choke, and end up getting submitted. I think that we've seen Ramos get subbed before. It's kind of a lack of fight IQ, but I think he's not going to like embracing the war and the striking of Erosa. And as long as Erosa's chin can hold up, I think he will force a panic shot out of Ramos and eventually catch that neck and lock up that Darce choke and get a submission. I'm going to go with Julian Juicy J. Erosa to get a second round Darce choke submission. I'm worried about the durability because I think Ramos can catch him with a spinning elbow, maybe a knee, maybe a head kick or just a big shot down the middle. And if he hurts him, Arosa's the type of fighter where he can get hurt and he can't really come back. So I wouldn't bet it just based off the durability concerns, but I do like Erosa to slow down Ramos, put the pressure on him, hurt him on the feet, force a panic shot, and then choke him out. Give me Julian Juicy J. Erosa, second round Darce choke submission. Up next, we've got the final fight on the prelims in the lightweight division between another Ultimate Fighter finalist and a former UFC veteran in Kurt Holobaugh taking on Trey Ogden. This is a very competitive fight. It's a very close fight, and I think the better technician in terms of the striking game, in terms of the grappling, in terms of the takedowns, is Trey Ogden. Ogden is a very lead hand heavy fighter. He likes to fight on the outside, use that jab, and use the check hook to keep the opponent kind of following him and mirroring him around the cage. He stays on the outside, uses that jab, catches the opponent coming in, which is either going to draw out bad counters or it's going to keep the opponent from throwing and keep him behind that stick. Trey Ogden likes to use that stick. That's what they call it in boxing. Use the stick and then chain that stick into the hoop. Chain the stick into the hoop. Jab, check hook, circle out. 1-1-2, jab, check hook, move around. And he will use kicks from time to time as well. Holobaugh also has really solid boxing. And the biggest difference is the combinations and the power of Kurt Holobaugh. I think the finishing upside is on the side of Kurt Holobaugh in terms of the striking. He has very good 1-2s. You saw in the fight against Austin Hubbard, man, once he started feeling like Hubbard was getting tired, he put that pace and pressure on him, man. It was 3, 4, 5 punch combinations. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 3, 1, 2. I mean, he was mixing up his combinations, throwing the right hand over the jab, ripping to the body, and he also has really solid grappling to fall back on. So let's say Ogden can't really keep Holobaugh at a distance and he can't stop him from pressuring forward. If Ogden shoots a bad shot, which he is a good wrestler, he does have good grappling. In his last fight against Nicholas Mota, we saw the counter forward pressure takedowns where he was countering the forward pressure of Mota with those takedowns and eventually locked up that arm triangle choke in the third round. And that was just a huge mismatch and everything because Mota didn't tap and the ref jumped in and stopped it. It was just terrible, absolutely awful reffing job from Mike Beltran in that matchup. But at the same time, I think Ogden, if he can keep it on the outside, he'll win. If he gets pressured, pushed back, and kind of backed up, then I think Holobaugh's power and forward pressure is what's going to win him this fight. I also think that even if Ogden does use the wrestling, the jiu-jitsu and submission threat of Holobaugh is very, very high in this matchup as well. You saw on the Ultimate Fighter against Hubbard, he went for an armbar and then transitioned it into a triangle as Hubbard defended the armbar. He went belly down. As he turned into Holobaugh, he transitioned it right into a triangle choke. So he can not only have submission threats off of his back, he can chain submission attempts together and get you to walk into things that you think you're avoiding. You avoid one thing, you're walking into the other. He can set really solid traps in the grappling. Now, Ogden has a lot of submissions in his career as well, so if the grappling cancels each other out, it's going to be the jab and the check hook of Ogden staying on the outside and catching Holobaugh coming in versus the 1-2 of Kurt Holobaugh, the forward pressure, the combinations, and the power that Holobaugh possesses on the feet. I think it's a very close matchup, but I'm actually going to side with... Oh, man, I don't know. This is one of the hardest fights for me to predict. I'm going to side with Holobaugh, though. I know that Ogden is probably going to be the better technical fighter, but at the same time, I think Holobaugh's power, combinations, and submission threat on the mat, he's more dangerous in this matchup than Ogden. If Ogden can keep Holobaugh on the outside, I think Ogden can win this one. But oh man, I don't know. I got to think. Let me think. Like I said, man, this matchup is very difficult to predict. It's very hard to pick a winner. Think. I'll go with Ogden. I don't know, man. I don't know. Because the power, the bigger moments, the submission threat, it's all there for Holloway. Screw it. I'm going to stick with my gut. Give me Kurt Holloway. I'm going to go with Holloway to land the bigger, more impactful shots, hurt Ogden on the feet more than Ogden hurts him, and just, punctuate rounds with the bigger moments. Threaten with submissions, look to set up subs. I think Holloway wins by decision. Give me Kurt Holloway to defeat Trey Ogden via a split decision. I don't think he gets a finish. I don't see a finish on either side, but I think Holloway gets the dub and wins via decision because he has the higher power on the feet, the bigger moments in the fight, and the bigger ability to have bigger moments, and has good submissions off of his back. So Kurt Holloway, 29-28 split decision in this matchup. Up next, we've got a battle in the featherweight division between Luis Corazon de Leon Pauelo taking on Fernando Padilla. I think this fight's going to be amazing. I think both of these guys are going to throw down. I think this is going to be very similar to the fight earlier on the card with Igor da Silva and Andre Lima. And here's the deal. The more technical striker, the cleaner fighter, the fighter who's going to be able to dictate the range is going to be Fernando Padilla. But the one thing I don't like about Padilla, I picked Padilla to knock out Julian Erosa, but again, that's a guy who has a lot of chin issues and durability concerns. We don't have that from Pauelo. The biggest thing is going to be the range and distance, and who's going to be able to close the pocket. I actually think Pauelo is going to be able to get inside on a fighter like Padilla because of the fact that Padilla does not have good defense. I'm not saying Pauelo's defense is that much better, but he does high guard and kind of walks forward, almost like a peekaboo style. He kind of walks forward, keeps those hands up, and looks to come back with big counters. He's got beautiful shots to the body. The 1-2 is extremely clean, and that right hand, he's able to just kind of shoot that in there and land over the opponent's defensive holes. And I think that's going to be the biggest difference. And another thing is the fact that he hasn't been finished. I could see Padilla kind of keeping him on the outside, 1-2s, using the jab, 1-2-3, throw a low kick, jab, low kick, front kicks to the body, try to time the knee as Pauelo steps in on the inside. But I liked Pauelo on the Contender Series, and I really think that this guy has an opportunity to not necessarily break a fighter like Padilla, but he's got the power to hurt Padilla. He's got better defensive ability than Padilla on the feet, and I feel like he's going to be able to push that pace and pressure for 15 minutes more than a guy like Fernando Padilla is going to be able to do. The fact that Pauelo has never been finished, it gives me a little more confidence in siding with him, and I am going to side with him. I think, obviously, UFC experience you have to give to Padilla, but in that last fight against Kyle Nelson, it was close. I feel like it was close enough to where you could give it to a fighter like Padilla, but they ended up giving the decision to Kyle Nelson. But at the same time, he was a massive favorite in that fight, like a 3-1 favorite, and he's coming in here again as a 2-1 favorite, and it's a more stylistically favorable matchup on paper, but I think it's a much more dangerous matchup for him than the fight with Kyle Nelson, because Nelson isn't known as a knockout artist. Nelson isn't known as having that finishing ability and having that finishing upside. And the one thing I like about Pauelo is he has a ton of finishes. He's got clean boxing. He moves forward. He's never been finished. And, I mean, he knows how to pick his shots. That right hand is beautiful. The left hook to the body. When he drops you, he'll attack body shots on the ground. Landed a big knee to the liver or to the sternum of Robbie Ring that led up to the finish in the first round. And I don't think Padilla is going to be able to break a guy like Pauelo, but I think Pauelo is going to be able to break a guy like Padilla. If somebody breaks in this fight, I think it's Padilla who ends up breaking down the stretch. I'm going to take Corazon de Leon in this fight as the plus 155 underdog. Give me Luis Pauelo. I think that he has the power to not allow Padilla to flow on the feet, and I don't think he's going to be able to keep the distance and range for the majority of the fight. I don't think he's going to be able to keep Pauelo away from him for most of the fight. His defense isn't that great. He relies a lot on his movement more than head movement or actual defense, and he leaves his chin in the air to get clipped. He got clipped a lot the longer the fight with Kyle Nelson went on, and And I think Paulo has the technical ability in his hands and the boxing and the power to hurt a guy like Padilla. So I'm going to take a second round TKO for Corazon de Leon, Luis Paulo over Fernando Padilla. Again, as an underdog. I have a ton of underdogs on this card, but there's a lot of underdogs I don't think should be underdogs. So Luis Paulo, second round TKO over Fernando Padilla in his UFC debut. But mark this fight down. This is going to be a banger from start to finish. All right, up next, we've got a battle in the featherweight division. The UFC return of Factory X's Moroccan Devil in Yusuf Zalal taking on Billy Q Quarantillo. This is going to be a good fight. I think a lot of people are going to come in counting out Yusuf Zalal because he didn't have the greatest UFC career. He did go to a decision, though, with the current UFC featherweight champion in Ilia Topuria. And aside from Josh Emmett, he's the only fighter in the UFC to make it 15 minutes or 25 minutes on the case of Emmett or make it 25 minutes with the champion in Topuria. So you do have to look at that and think, how good is he? How durable is he? But the thing with Billy Q, I think the better technical striker is Yusuf Zalal. I do think that if Zalal wants to have the most success in this fight, it would probably be wise to resort to his grappling. I think if he changes levels and gets takedowns and tries to punctuate rounds with top control time and takedowns in the last 90 seconds of the round, I think he could probably secure him on the judges' scorecards. We've seen in his fights outside of the UFC that he does have good submissions. He can go for head and arm chokes. He can go for arm triangles. He can get takedowns. He has good flying knees on the feet. Billy Q has been knocked out with a knee by Edson Barbosa, so maybe he's going to use a lot of level changes, skate around the outside, throw some deep kicks to the body, throw some front kicks, work the leg, and then feint and come up top with a flying knee. Kind of like Cody Gibson against Miles Johns. I think the flying knee definitely is live for Yusuf Zalal, but I'm sure Billy Q is going to be wise to it. I think the pace and pressure is going to be the biggest weapon for whoever wins this fight. Can Yusuf Zalal kind of break the rhythm of Billy Q and stop him from building momentum the longer the fight goes? If he does, he'll probably win the fight. I don't necessarily think Zalal would finish Billy Q, but Zalal can win if he breaks Billy Q's rhythm and kind of forces him to constantly reset. The biggest thing is the power of the reset. And if he's not allowing Billy Q to keep the train rolling, then I think Zalal can outpoint him, land bigger shots, get those takedowns, mix in the takedowns to break the rhythm, and maybe secure 2 out of the 3 rounds. But outside of the UFC, there wasn't a lot of wins that I saw, where I was like, okay, this guy's ready to really make a statement in the UFC. Zalal is good. He uses a good jab, good 1-2s, uses that footwork and lateral movement. He's always on his bicycle. He has flying knees to counter the forward pressure, which again is going to be a big weapon against a fighter who relies on building and building and building and building and building. Billy Q is like a Walmart version of a Piotr Jan. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I love the way Billy Q fights. But when this guy smells blood, he's going to put that pace and pressure on you. He's going to throw those rear uppercuts. He's going to measure and throw those uppercuts. He's going to throw the right hand. He's going to step in with that left hook, that wide looping left hook, jab, left hook. He's going to pair it together, rear uppercut, knees to the body, time the knee on the takedown. And I don't think Zalal has the cardio to go 15 minutes with a fighter who has the style of a Billy Quarantillo. I think Quarantillo might get pieced up in the first round. I would not be surprised if Zalal lands good shots, peppers him with the jab, throws good low kicks, rips to the body, catches him with knees coming in, and wins the first round 10-9, and then starts to slow down, and the movement isn't as fast, and you see a few big deep breaths from Billy Q. Not from Billy Q. You see a couple big deep breaths from Zalal as Billy Q is pushing him back and getting him on that back foot, and then the jab's going to start to work. And then the uppercut's going to start to work. And then the check hook to the right hand, the jab, the knees to the body, the front kicks, the 1-2 down the middle. And I think he's going to slowly but surely start to drown Yusuf Zalal the longer the fight goes. I think in round 2, he's going to drown Yusuf Zalal. I think Zalal probably makes it to the 3rd round, but I think this is going to be very similar to another guy who fights out of Factory X, or at least he used to. I'm not sure if he still does. I think he does. In Alexander Hernandez. Hernandez looked very good in that first round and really kind of pieced up Billy Q. And I think Zalal doesn't have the power, but he's technically better and kind of mixes it up a little better than Alexander Hernandez, but I think the longer the fight goes, he's not really going to have the opportunity to break the momentum swing, and he's going to get tired, he's going to get pushed back, he's going to get, those combinations landed on him, the jab, the check hook, the uppercuts, the knees, the front kicks, pushing up against the cage in the clinch. And if he can't use that wrestling to kind of offset the forward momentum and, building up of Billy Q, then it's going to be a bad night for him. And I think we're actually going to see Youssef Zalal get finished in the third round against Billy Q. I'm going to go with Billy Quarantillo to get a third round TKO. I think he's just going to put that pace on Zalal. And I know Zalal made it 15 minutes with Ilia Topuria, but it's a different style of fight. And with the movement that Zalal is always kind of encompassing in the octagon, with the lateral movement, the in and out movement, constantly circling around the cage, that backwards movement paired with the forward pressure of Billy Q, yes, is going to line up Billy Q for counters, but it's going to allow for Billy Q to slow down Zalal more and more and more until he eventually breaks him. I think he puts those combinations on him and hurts him in round 3, drops him, and gets him out of there with a TKO. I'm going to go with Billy Q Quarantillo to get the job done via third round TKO against the UFC returning Youssef Zalal. All right, up next, we've got a battle in the bantamweight division between two Contender Series alums in Peyton Talbot taking on Cameron Saaiman. This is another great fight. I've said that a lot on this card. I think this card's getting slept on a little bit on paper. Peyton Talbot and Cameron Saaiman, the UFC experience, you have to give it to Saaiman. He just came off a pretty competitive fight in certain aspects with Christian Rodriguez, competitive in the scrambles, competitive on the ground. But when you really look at it, I don't think that fight was super competitive. I think it was pretty clear that Christian Rodriguez ended up winning that decision. So even though it was competitive and there were scrambles and, Saaiman did end up on top in certain positions, I don't think it's as competitive as people are thinking. I think it was a pretty clear decision win for Christian Rodriguez. Now, is that saying that I think Peyton Talbot can defeat a guy like Christian Rodriguez? No, I'm not saying that. The grappling edge and the grappling advantage is going to be on the side of Cameron Saaiman. But I think Peyton Talbot's takedown defense is going to have gotten better between the last fight until now. In his UFC debut, he took on Nick Aguirre. He took on Nick Aguirre, and he got taken down. He got controlled. He got his back taken for the first round. Almost got submitted, but was able to defend it. And then just was able to put the pressure on a guy like Nick Aguirre, break him down, and eventually submit him in round 3 when people thought that the clear jiu-jitsu edge was on the side of Nick Aguirre. But we know that when you break grapplers, when you break jiu-jitsu guys, you can submit him. Just look at Rodolfo Vieira and Anthony Hernandez. It's a perfect example of the same thing. Peyton Talbot is, in my opinion, the reach is going to be the biggest advantage here. The reach and the range. I think he's going to be able to keep Saaiman away from him. Saaiman does have good striking. He mixes up his stances between orthodox and southpaw. He'll change stances, attack that outside low kick when he's southpaw against the orthodox fighter. He likes to chop that outside leg to allow him to get that outside foot positioning against the opposite stance fighter. He'll attack the outside of the leg when they're in the same stance. The punctuating combinations and just throwing naked leg kicks is a big thing for Saaiman. Saaiman has good boxing. We've seen he does have knockout power. He puts his combinations together. He's constantly changing angles and changing stances from orthodox to southpaw. And he does have good grappling. We saw against Terrence Mitchell, kind of took him down, sliced through him like butter, and then eventually got that submission. I believe it was a submission, not a TKO. Might have been a TKO. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But I don't think he's going to have nearly as much success here against Peyton Talbot. And everybody's kind of saying like, oh, UFC experience for Saaiman, and he does train with Dricus du Plessis, but they're not in the same weight class, so they're not training together. They probably are doing some training, but that's not like his main training partner, so I think that narrative is kind of overblown. And I've talked about that before too, so, I'm not going to go over that again. But Peyton Talbot, he's going to have that reach. He's going to have that range. But the one thing I like about this guy is no matter how many times you take this guy down, no matter how many times you push this guy back, he gets up and he gets to work right away. Look on the Contender Series. He lost that first round against Cortez. and, got taken down, got controlled, got his back taken, got taken down. And whenever he got back up, the minute he got back up, he was throwing a 1-2. The minute he got back up, he was throwing a right hand, throwing a jab, 1-2, switch stance to southpaw, land the straight left hand. The stance switches and the angles with the straight punches from Peyton Talbot, I really like. He goes 1-2, switch southpaw, straight left. But it's not a 1-2 angle shift, big enunciated movement, and then throw the shot. It's just 1-2, switch, boom. 1-2, bop, bop. 1-2, bop, bop. And he switches orthodox, southpaw, mixes up combinations, finishes combinations with body kicks. He does remind me a lot of Sean O'Malley. I'm not going to say that this guy has the same upside as a Sugar Sean O'Malley. They both came off the Contender Series, but the striking style of Peyton Talbot reminds me a lot of a Sugar Sean O'Malley. Jabs, pull counter, right hands, 1-2s, good body kicks, 1-2, switch kick to the body. If he's able to stop those takedowns and stop the grappling of Cameron Saaiman, Saimon's going to get pieced up on the feet. I'm sorry, but he is. The reach, the range, Peyton Talbot is just so much bigger than Saaiman. And I think even if Saaiman takes down Peyton Talbot, he's going to be able to work his way back up to the feet. He's going to be able to use the cage to get back up. And although Saaiman has more UFC experience, I think that Christian Rodriguez fight showed that he is very solid because, like I said, it was competitive, but I believe it was still a clear win for Rodriguez. But the one thing you guys got to think about is the size of Rodriguez is what gave Saaiman so much trouble at bantamweight. Now he's at 145, so it makes sense. But Peyton Talbot is a lot bigger. He's a lot longer. He's a lot stronger, I believe. I mean, you don't know for sure if he's stronger, but he's going to be a lot bigger than Saaiman inside the cage. And I think that size is, again, going to give him a problem where even if he does use the takedowns to offset the striking rhythm of Talbot, even if he does get on the top position, I don't think he's going to be able to hold down Talbot. We have seen holes in his grappling game. We have seen him get his back taken by Nick Aguirre. But I would say, positionally, I think Nick Aguirre is a more decorated grappler than Saaiman. Saimon's a way more well-rounded fighter. But I think Aguirre is a better positional grappler than Saaiman. I think the striking is going to be too much for Saaiman. I think the range, the 1-2s, the jabs, the switch stances, I think the size is going to be too much, and I think Talbot's going to get the job done here. I could see a finish, but I'm going to give Saaiman the credit and say that he does survive for 15 minutes, but I think it's a clear 29-28 unanimous decision for Peyton Talbot here against Cameron Saaiman. I think that this kid's for real. Obviously you can't throw all your eggs into one basket, and coming off Contender Series, you never know, but from what I've seen from this kid, he can stay in a fight when the going gets tough. He can get himself out of bad positions. He can come back later on in fights and look for a finish. He's going to be the longer, taller, rangier guy. He's probably not as technical as Saaiman, but what he lacks in that technicality, he makes up for in size, reach, length, and power in his striking. So I'm going to take Peyton Talbot. I like Talbot a lot here. Give me Peyton Talbot, 29-28, unanimous decision over Cameron Saaiman. Up next, you got a battle in the middleweight division between Edmen Shahbazyan, the Golden Boy, taking on AJ Dobson. I'm actually surprised by the amount of people taking Edmen Shahbazyan in this fight. Don't get me wrong, the guy has had a lot of good success in the UFC. The competition level is nowhere near the level of an AJ Dobson. Edmen has fought the much better guys, the much higher level competition. I mean, Derek Brunson, Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, I wouldn't say Dolce Lungiambola, but, Derek Brunson, Anthony Hernandez, Brad Tavares, that's just a few of the guys that Edmen Shahbazyan has taken on. And he's been competitive in most fights, but he is a guy who can be broken. I think AJ Dobson is getting a little bit disrespected in this fight because I feel like he can hang with Shahbazyan on the feet. And I think if anybody uses their wrestling and grappling in this fight, I think it's Dobson securing takedowns. I think he can use that wrestling. I think he can take down a guy like Shahbazyan. And the one thing we know about Shahbazyan is that the longer the fight goes, he tends to break. If you push back Edmen Shahbazyan, if he doesn't have as much success as he wants to, if you're able to grind it out and get takedowns, he is a guy who will get tired in that second round, who will get tired, who will break mentally the longer the fight goes. I think AJ Dobson sticks to a game plan. I think he can compete with Shabazian on the feet. He has good 1-2s, decent head movement, solid lead leg kicks to the head, to the body, good low kicks. Uses his jab really well, is good defensively, uses a lot of angles, stepping out and pivoting, step out and pivot, jab, jab, slip, roll, 1-2, come back, 2-3, step out, lead kick to the body, 1-2, lead kick to the body, cross, lead, head kick. I mean, he mixes it up very well, and I think he has the ability to compete with Shabazian on the feet, when a lot of people think it's just going to be a whitewash for Shabazian. But Shabazian now is not the Shabazian of old. I think he's stronger. I think he's going to be much stronger in the grappling exchanges. I think he's going to be able to get those takedowns. I think he's going to be able to get top control time. I think he will slow down a fighter like Shabazian. And I think those kicks on the feet and the ability to compete with Shabazian on the feet and not get finished, I think that's a big weapon here for AJ Dobson. I like AJ Dobson in this fight. I don't think we have to spend a whole lot of time on it. I think obviously the better technician is Edmen Shabazian. The better level of competition is Edmen Shabazian. But the stronger fighter, the better grappler, the fighter who has better cardio over 15 minutes, the fighter who can stick to a game plan better, the fighter who will resort to the grappling, that's AJ Dobson. The fighter who I think can compete with Shabazian on the feet is AJ Dobson. And I think he's going to have the cardio to push through those last 2 rounds, when I think Shabazian will start to get tired toward the midpoint of the second and going into the third. And he might win like the first 2 rounds and then just break in round 3. I think Shabazian's a guy we've seen get broken multiple times, and I think Dobson is a fighter who can break a fighter like Shabazian as long as he doesn't get clipped by that big 1-2 or that big lead head kick. But we've never seen AJ Dobson get finished or knocked out inside the UFC. So, I mean, you're kind of just got to go with what they give you. And I have more confidence in Dobson being able to defeat Shabazian than I have confidence in picking a guy like Shabazian at this point in his UFC career. I'm going to take AJ Dobson to get the job done here via a 3rd round ground and pound TKO. I think a lot of these finishes on this card will come late for these underdogs. And I think Dobson will use that wrestling. I think he will slow down Shabazian. I think he's going to be competitive enough to compete with him. And then he eventually just breaks him down the stretch like we've seen before. So give me AJ Dobson, 3rd round TKO as the plus 160 underdog against Edmen Shabazian. And now we move to the co-main event of the evening between Carl Williams and Justin Tafa in the heavyweight division. 7-3 on the side of Tafa, 9-1 on the side of Carl Williams. I think if Tafa doesn't get a first-round knockout, he's going to lose this fight. I mean, I think we've known that with the Tafa brothers. They're not good grapplers. They don't have really good takedown defense. And I think the biggest path to victory for Carl Williams is get in the face of Tafa, avoid the big overhands or uppercuts, shoot a takedown, push Tafa up against the cage, and just go to work with ground and pound, look for submissions and things like that. I think Carl Williams is going to be able to get on the inside and take down a fighter like Tafa, but there's always that possibility for a first-round knockout from the Tafa brothers. I think Justin Tafa can land a big overhand and hurt him, can land a big uppercut and knock him out, but I think more times than not, the longer the fight goes, it plays heavily in the favor of Carl Williams. I think he can get in the face of Tafa. I think he does avoid those power shots, and I think it's going to be a lot of heavy grappling, cage pushing, knees to the body, knees to the thighs, takedowns off the cage. And once Justin Tafa gets put on his back, just like the other Tafa and Junior Tafa, they're going to be a fish out of water. They're not great when it comes to the grappling, and I think Carl Williams kind of slices through Tafa on the mat. I like Carl Williams by submission in this fight. I don't think this fight goes the distance. I could see it making the distance if Tafa's able to survive, but he won't have the knockout power in round 2 or round 3, so I think he'll kind of just slow down, kind of like what we saw with Marcin Tybura and Tai Tuivasa. I think it's kind of the same thing where Williams is going to avoid the big shots, maybe get clipped with something, but if it's not a first-round knockout for Justin Tafa, then the fight definitely goes to the side of Carl Williams. I think the pace, the cardio, the pressure, the takedowns, the top control, I think Carl Williams just eventually gets that takedown, gets to the top position, lands a bunch of ground and pound, and then locks up an arm triangle choke. I'm going to go with Carl Williams to defeat Justin Tafa via second round arm triangle choke submission. Obviously, you do have to worry about him getting chinned in the first round because Tafa does have one-hitter quitter knockout power, but I do not think that happens. I think the takedowns, the wrestling, the cage pushing, and the grappling is what wins this fight. So I like Carl Williams to survive the first round, get those takedowns, ground and pound, and then head and arm choke. So Carl Williams, second round, arm triangle choke submission over Justin Tafa. And now we get to the main event of the evening in the strawweight division. Well, this is actually in the flyweight division, but I said strawweight because both of these women are technically strawweights fighting at 125 between Amanda Ribas coming off that TKO victory over Luana Pinheiro, taking on the former strawweight champion, former Ultimate Fighter finalist in Thug Rose Namajunas. Man, I think this fight is kind of going to be one-way traffic. I think Namajunas is going to slice through Amanda Ribas. The biggest thing you have to worry about is the mental state of Rose Namajunas, because how is she going to come into this fight? How is she going to compete? You know, after that really terrible performance against Carla Esparza. She looked decent in spots against Manon Fiorot. I think there wasn't really a huge technical advantage on the side of Fiorot. It was kind of just a size advantage. But I do think that Rose was competitive in that fight and live in that fight, but we clearly knew at the end of it that Fiorot had won on the scorecards. But Namajunas is one of the best strikers in the women's divisions. Really good movement, really light on the feet, in and out, lateral movement, 1-2s. She uses a lot of stutter steps and feints. You know, stutter step, feint, jab, jab. She uses that jab, jab, check hook, 1-2 down the middle, cross hook, slip, come back, pivot off. Really good pivots, really good movement. Jab, check hook, slip, uppercut, 1-2, slip. Really good lead. Head kicks. Can kind of mix up her kicking game. She can go with like hook kicks, front leg side kicks, and lead leg roundhouse kicks like she knocked out Zhang Wei Li with. But look at the performances against Zhang Wei Li. You know, that first fight with a big first round knockout via head kick, and then in the second fight winning the decision even though it was close. She was able to punctuate the rounds with that switch stance takedown, the outside trip from orthodox to southpaw when the opponent's in the same stance, switching stances and getting that takedown. But I don't see anywhere where Ribas really can compete with Rose Namajunas. I don't think she can out-grapple her. I definitely don't think she can out-strike her. I think Rose is a lot more durable than Amanda Ribas. We've seen Ribas get TKO'd, I think, 3 times in her career against Macy Barber, Marina Rodriguez, and I believe one other fighter. Maybe it's only 2 times, but still. And I think the power and speed of Namajunas is going to be too much for Ribas. If Ribas wins this, she has to make it dirty. She has to make it nasty. She has to try to break Namajunas the longer the fight goes. But we've also seen Namajunas go 25 minutes. We've seen her go a hard 25 minutes. We've seen her go a competitive 25 minutes. Now, again, the biggest question is, where is Rose at mentally? Is Rose in this fight ready to go on point? Then I think she knocks out Amanda Ribas. But if Rose isn't the same Rose that we've seen, and she kind of comes in like she came in against Carla Esparza, comes in and isn't ready to go like some of her fights before where she should have looked very good and kind of just looked lackluster, then maybe Ribas gets the job done. You know, you do have to worry about the mental side of this fight, I think, more than the physical side, because the physical side, the skill set, the overall more well-rounded fighter, the more technical fighter, the more dangerous fighter, that's all on the side of Namajunas, man. I mean, Namajunas, it's just the mentality. Is she here ready to go, or is she thinking about personal stuff? Is she not ready to go? Does she have like some mental hurdles that she has to overcome going into this fight? Because then she's probably not going to perform to the best of her ability, and in turn, the fight is probably going to be a lot closer. But I don't think that Ribas can compete with Namajunas on the ground. I do not think she can compete in the striking, and she gets hit too much. She doesn't have good defense, and with the speed, power, and technicality of Namajunas, I think we get a finish here from Thug Rose. I say she comes into this fight on, ready to go, and I think she's going to knock out Amanda Ribas. I think that 1-2, I think the head kick, I think that right hand lands clean on the chin of Ribas, wobbles her, and then Rose Namajunas jumps on her, lands some ground and pound, and I think she ends up getting a submission. I'm going to go with Rose Namajunas, Thug Rose Namajunas, to get back on the winning track, get her first win at 125 pounds, and do so via a third round rear naked choke submission. I think she drops her with that right hand, hurts her, jumps on her, takes her back, and takes her neck. Thug Rose Namajunas round. You know what? We'll go round 2. I think Rose makes a statement here. Thug Rose Namajunas round 2 club and sub, dropping her with the right hand, locking up the rear naked choke, and getting the dub in the main event. That's going to be it for my UFC Vegas 89 preview, predictions, and breakdown. The fights take place this upcoming Saturday from the UFC Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada. This podcast is obviously available on YouTube. I'm going to try to put this back on the audio platform after I upload this to my YouTube channel. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed these picks. I hope you guys enjoyed the fights this weekend, and let's make some money at UFC Vegas 89.